Is populism actually democratic, or is it a threat to democracy? The answer to both of those questions is yes. I said recently about the rise of populism, and how that rise poses a threat to the liberal world order as established after World War II. Populism is difficult to define, but Yascha Mounk, in this book here, The People versus Democracy, argues that it is in fact highly democratic. This feels counterintuitive because of how populists attack the foundations of our democracies, but modern populists like Trump rely on democratic legitimacy. It's important here to draw the distinction between liberalism and democracy. Trump proclaims to be the retribution of the people, and through him the will of the people shall be done. Look at how they talk about their democratic mandate right now. A lot of this is obviously posturing, but he was in fact elected with a majority, and there is a genuine undercurrent of anger and resentment at the status quo, an energy that Trump seeks to release and ride the wave of. In some ways, this is the very essence of democracy. The problem with populism, though, is that it's illiberal, and as liberal institutions collapse, the long-term effect is to undermine democracy as well. This might be a bitter pill to swallow for some, but in my opinion, democracy doesn't work without moderating institutions. It has to exist within a set of normative, inviolable boundaries, otherwise it destroys itself. This is why after the collapse of Athenian democracy, for example, most major political theorists for centuries dismissed democracy as unstable and dangerous. Depending on who you're talking to, this can sometimes also be the difference between democracy and republicanism, whereas democracy relies on the majority principle, that numerical majority should always rule, whereas republicanism, depending on how you define it, is a blend of democracy and other political orientations. Something I view as important is we shouldn't just look at democracy as a value and then seek to maximize it. Yascha Mounk sees the world's liberal democracies as collapsing into two new forms: illiberal democracy and undemocratic liberalism. We should look at this conflict seriously and decide what our values actually are. And because most of the enemies of liberal democracy are attacking liberalism, not democracy, that's the battlefield we should be fighting on. For a long time, people on both sides have denounced a lot of the moderating liberal institutions as corrupt and anti-democratic. But the whole point of them is to prevent the excesses of democracy from undermining individual rights and liberties. And if it's anti-democratic, so be it. The wolf shouldn't be able to vote to eat the sheep. Yet, leftists and right-wingers are united in that they both despise liberals. This I view as absurd. I do view Trump as a democratic figure, though profoundly illiberal and detrimental to the future of my country. To me, he's a good example of why we have these institutions in the first place, because if he could, he would violate our individual rights and liberties. I wish more people were willing to defend institutions and ideologies that uphold the foundation of American freedom, because without defenders, we will lose both liberalism and democracy in the long run. Ultimately, populists claim to speak for the people, but in doing so, they decide who counts as the people, and with the votes, they can define you out of it.